Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we are back here in April with another episode of the Transatlantic Conversation with a little bit delay according to technical problems. And it's always me with the technical problems. It's nice to see and to hear you and to tell me
Great to
about
see you.
new situation in the US and how it's going in Portland. So, how are you? What are you doing at the moment, David?
I'm good, but what's happening here is well, I mean that as far as that I've been involved with and that I think is actually kind of a major developing local story here is the resistance to the police sweeps, as they call them, of the homeless tent communities that are all over the city and all over the country. But here in Portland, it's the most rent burdened city in the country in terms of how expensive it is relative to how much people make. And there's just a massive, massive population of people living in cars and on the streets and in tents and in old broken down vehicles or vehicles that are still working. It's just so many people living in these kinds of conditions, and the police are constantly towing people's vehicles and taking people's tents and taking people's things, and it's already a very precarious existence for them. They're already constantly being attacked and having stuff stolen from them, and they're being told by the police that they can't have more than 8 tents in one area. So this is kind of like they're not preventing people from being in a tent completely, but they're very much limiting how many tents in one area and how long they can stay there, and just basically making people's lives very, very difficult, lives that are already extremely difficult, because obviously these are people who have nowhere to live. So, and they're not offering them anywhere to live either. They're not offering them a real solution. They're just saying, why don't you move your tent to another park? There's too many tents here. So it's just crazy. So we've had more than 100 people dying on the sidewalks of this city every year, because of this crisis, this housing crisis, this crisis of people living on the streets. In Los Angeles in 2019, more than 1,000 people died on the streets of Los Angeles. But I think it's even more alarming, actually, that Portland, which is a much, much smaller city than Los Angeles, in 2019, 113 people died living on the streets of this city. And we don't even know how many people died last year. There's no numbers yet for that.
And the people that are now living in tents or living in the cars or more or less homeless, are these people that were homeless before the pandemic, or are there? It's very increasing that there are a lot of people that have low paid wages now also live on the street.
It's it's a real big combination, but definitely it's a lot of people who had nowhere to live before the pandemic, and a lot more people who have had to or who have felt they had to or did have to move out during the pandemic. A lot of what's happening, it seems, is it's not. Sometimes it's people getting evicted. Sometimes it's just people are owe more and more rent, and they're just afraid of what's going to happen when the eviction moratorium ends, or they're afraid of what's going to happen with their credit rating or their ability to rent a place in the future if they have an eviction on their record. So a lot of people sort of self-evict. And so there's a lot of that going on. There's also a lot of like people living in a group situation where maybe they can afford to pay the rent, but their roommate can't. And so they fall behind on the rent because of that. So there's a lot of different things happening. And of course, there's also a huge problem with untreated mental health issues and untreated drug and alcohol addiction, or just, drug and alcohol addiction that is just, whether it's being treated or not. I mean, people need help. They don't just need treatment for their drug addiction. They need somewhere to live. They need both. They need a lot of things. A lot of people need a lot of things. And there's just no social system in this country. It's completely broken. It's just a shambles. I mean, you call for, if there's somebody having a mental health crisis on the streets of anywhere in this country, most of the time if you call for help from the authorities, if you get any help, you're going to end up with an angry guy with a gun, we call them cops, and that's not a solution. All they do is escalate the problem. All they do is shoot people. They don't solve these problems. They just come make them worse. So, there's a real crisis on the streets. There's a mental health crisis. There's an opiate crisis. There's a homelessness crisis. And there's no help virtually, at least from the authorities, very little, nothing comparable to the problem, and then the police who are there to supposedly help actually just make everything worse regularly, constantly. I mean, the police will come into a neighborhood, as I just heard at a press conference at Laurelhurst Park yesterday from somebody. They were saying the police will come into a neighborhood. They'll be after somebody has been shot in a tent community, and they'll play music. The song, the Queen song, "Another One Bites the Dust."
Okay.
They'll play that as they're coming into a neighborhood where people are homeless, or into a black neighborhood where somebody's been shot. They'll play that song.
So they have
on their
fun
loudspeaker.
dealing with the people. They have fun to make them feel bad.
Yeah, just to provoke people.
Provoke
Not
people,
to
yeah.
help at all. Yeah,
Yeah.
just to treat them like dirt, like they're subhuman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's no welfare system there, and there's no people that live on the streets. Do they get any aid from the government, or is there nothing?
What's really amazing is I was just talking to somebody from this group Stop the Sweeps here in Portland, who's really talking to a lot of people, a lot more people than I talk to, who are living on the streets. And she was telling me that actually a lot of the folks living in tents have succeeded in getting on unemployment, and they have gotten their stimulus money. But the way things are, I mean, for one reason or another, they can't get places to live. Partly because it's just they're not making enough money to get a place to live in some cases, because things are so expensive here. But then other times they have an eviction on their record, or they're alcoholics, or they have they're having ongoing mental health issues that basically, most any landlord, a normal market rate kind of landlord, is going to not rent to them, because they have options, and they don't rent to people they don't want to rent to. Whatever the laws are, the reality is they don't rent to you if they don't want to rent to you. And so they have the possibility of getting, some kind of government housing that does exist, but it's such a small program. It's so inadequate to the need that you just, every once in a while you'll meet somebody who's gotten subsidized government housing. It's just not nearly enough to meet the needs.
So the problem is that there is no public health. There is no also no public health according to mental issues. So here in Germany, so you get from the Krankenkasse,
insurance.
insurance. As my
Right.
parents, and they're watching, and
Yeah, I just saw her.
I don't know the
Hi,
right
Mom.
word for insurance. And the insurance you get if you have a mental health problem, you get so and so much dates for the psychologist. But
Right.
in the US, you have to pay everything by yourself, or is
It
there?
varies. It varies by the state. And here in Oregon, we actually have one of the best systems now. We have pretty much universal health care, but it's like more like in England than in Germany. So, I mean, I happen to know people who have had to, look for mental health care in the US, in England, and in Germany. And I know how different the systems are. I mean, here and in England, if you're in Oregon or in England, if you're on the system, and you're trying to get mental health care, you might get like 5 appointments with a psychologist, and then they cut you off no matter what you need. Whereas in Germany, I happen to know, you'll get years of treatment potentially until you're better, but that's, yeah.
Depends on the insurance company, but
Okay.
if it's really necessary, you get that. So
Right.
that's okay. But you have to wait a little, but we have got self-pay. It's an app, and it's very good because you can get if you don't get psychologist once in a while because you have to wait too much long. You can do it online, and there you can do a treatment. And some insurance company you get it for free. So
Mm,
my insurance company, for example, they give you aids according to psychologist, according to um, new medicine, alternative medicine like osteopathy,
mm.
you know, and that's okay. But I think that's the reason why I don't want to live in the US because of the health system. I think that's
There's a lot of good reasons not to live in the US, I'd say. Yeah, I think about that often, but I'm still here.
yeah. And but during to the vaccination, it's you got more people vaccinated in the US than here in Germany. Here in
Yeah,
Germany,
it's very strange. I mean,
stocks, people don't know why, because it's of the bureaucrat
bureaucracy.
bureaucracy. We
Oh,
think
no, I can explain why, and this is I think it's very interesting because I mean, generally, as everybody observing the unfolding of the pandemic around the world can observe, the United States has had the most deaths of any country in the world, right? We've had more than 500,000 dead. We have lost like more than 1% of our population. Our lifespan has declined by over a year in 2020. you know and so people looking at the basically failed state nature of the situation here and in Brazil, but they look at the situation in the US and you think, okay, what a complete disaster. And so it seems a little surprising that we are having one of the fastest vaccine rollouts in the world, and of course, not sharing it with the rest of the world, right? Just hogging all the stuff here, right? But the reason why that is happening is because the billionaire class, the corrupt capitalist class, and their interests and the interests of humanity actually aligned for a moment. And so, like, the idea of giving massive amounts of money to pharmaceutical companies that you love anyway, because you're a billionaire capitalist that runs America, right? And somebody like Trump, they love they love giving money to capitalists, taking money from the people and giving it to the capitalists any chance they get. So of course, here was an opportunity to just pour money into the coffers of every pharmaceutical company in the world, and or certainly in the country. And then and no matter whether they actually come up with anything good at all, just give them all this money. And then, well, they were lucky and a bunch of them came up with good vaccines. So now we got loads of good vaccine. But, that was just, so other countries other than the US and the UK generally didn't want to do this kind of strategy of just pouring money into the pharmaceutical companies because, they had enough sense to know, like, actually, most of this research is being done publicly at universities, like Oxford and wherever else. And, and this is not, why do we need to be pouring money into these big pharmaceutical companies anyway? We should just, the universities and our public health sectors should produce these vaccines, but, that's, I mean, so yeah, here it was like, yeah, you get free vaccine and we've given massive amounts of subsidies to pharmaceutical companies. So it was like win-win for the pharmaceutical companies and for the people. So, I mean, kind of like one of those moments where capitalism, it was good for capitalism and it was good for the people. So it happened,
but it's yeah, but the people will oh, my English today is very bad. No,
because your parents are what?
I don't know. Vaccination in the US is not growing so fast that the death tolls are going down rapidly, or
No,
is
because right, because we have these new variants of the disease, and they're coming from all over the world where there is not vaccination happening. So the variant that I think in Europe they're calling the British variant, which is also from South
South
Africa and
African.
other places. But these variants are the more common ones, and they're like 4 times as infectious as the normal variant, and so. The vaccination campaign, even if it's really fast, it can't keep up with how fast COVID is spreading here.
Mm.
And also, many states are lifting their mask mandates, and with no scientific reason to do it. They're just doing it, because they're run by Republicans, basically. And so, the disease is going to get much worse soon before it gets better. Yeah, here.
So in some states you don't have to wear a mask inside, not in public. No,
No, like
there's
Florida.
no law to wear a mask in
No,
any place. Okay.
not in Florida. I mean, so like even local places that want to have a mask mandate, I think they get overruled by the state not having a mask mandate. So it's just states that have a lot of tourism, especially in the winter, like Florida, where people go there from all over the country, get COVID, and then leave. Yeah.
Here's is the problem. The COVID is spreading because of people getting together at home or here in Hamburg. Now I'm in Hamburg. I normally live near Stuttgart, and here a few days ago there was a big party, about 500 people. They were gathering together at the Alster. There's a big lake here, and
Yeah.
spreading
Drinking
the disease,
Alsterwasser.
drinking Alsterwasser, were drunk and falling into the Alster, and so yeah, it's spreading, and little shops are closing down because they don't allowed to have one or two people in, and Mercedes-Benz is having get more money this year than last year.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and they get aids from the state also.
Mm.
Uh, the capitalism is not dying. See,
No, capitalism is saving itself once again in
you
Germany.
don't have to be
But
afraid.
but are there a lot of are the protests spreading over there? I mean, we're hearing about more and more protests in different European countries. What's going on in Germany as far as anti-mask
Yeah, there
protests?
was a big. It was 2 weeks ago. It was in Kassel. You know Kassel? It's
Kassel, yeah, beautiful town. Yeah.
in the middle of Germany, and
One of my favorite bookstores is there. It's
yeah,
called it's like a Palestinian-run bookstore called the Book Oasis. Yeah, Book Oasis. Yeah, in Kassel. If anybody's
and there 2 weeks ago there was a big demonstration. No, the judge, the court, they allowed them to make a gathering, not a demonstration. So then there were 5,000 people that was allowed, and after that there was a demonstration about 20,000 people, no
Mm.
mask, nothing, and the police was doing nothing. They let
Wow.
them go, and there were some people trying to offend demonstrators, and the police officers they kicked them out.
Mm.
So
Yeah, I mean, what I don't know what else the police would reasonably do. I mean, of course, I know if it were like 20,000 black bloc, they'd be wading into them with
yeah,
truncheons and stuff.
and
But
yeah,
what else should the police do with 20,000 people, even if it's like something like that? I mean, it seems like probably reasonable for them not to attack 20,000 protesters, right?
no,
I
and
mean,
they say okay, these but what they do, it was illegal because
yeah.
they were not allowed to demonstrate, to walk. They was just allowed to have a gathering. So the police said, we don't do anything because we don't want to hurt the demonstrators, and we don't expect so much people. So I think I was at a demonstration in 2011 here in Heilbronn near Stuttgart, and
Mhm.
there were Nazis were marching. They were coming 4 hours late for their demonstration, but they still have to run. They were allowed to run, and the Antifa was they make, we say it, a castle, you know.
A
Um,
kettle? Like they boxed them in? Mhm.
and there were it was very hot summer day, and there were for 8 hours they were in there.
Oh,
So
terrible.
it was yes, that's and now I have read an article from a police officer here, and he said he admit that um, the police here is acting different according to left and right people, and he's working for the police. So some critical policemen you have, and they really yeah.
Yeah.
So it's
That's pretty obvious, right? I mean, even the police can acknowledge that unless they're just gaslighting us, because it's very obvious. I mean, and of course, here in the U.S., the Capitol attack on January 6th made what made that point very, very clearly in terms of how the police react differently to different kinds of protesters. I mean, there were hardly any cops at the Capitol building that day.
no, and that's
They had 40,000 members of the far right basically
yeah,
laying siege to the building, and there was hardly anybody there.
yeah. And there was also at this demonstration in Kassel, we got a picture from young police officer girl, and she made her heart to the demonstrators. So she said it was good. So and then the demonstrators, they have a live stream from their demonstration. They film like at the siege of the Capitol. They were
Mm.
not afraid to have anything to do. We saw it, their faces, and so it's they think we can do anything. It's they won't stop us. So that's the opinion of most of the people. So
Mhm. I mean, of course, on one level, it's like you can see how like doing something really illegal and filming yourself doing it is not very smart. But on the other side, if you're doing something somewhat illegal and you're prepared to face consequences for it, then it can be very good to do it very publicly, because then you're saying, "Hey, look, okay, arrest
yeah,
me," and then see what happens.
yeah.
I mean, I have gone all over this city with stickers against eviction, defacing public property. Let's see, here it is. And nothing ever happens. But I think if I were to get, any kind of little, court date for putting these stickers up, it would just give so much publicity to the cause. I'm sure they wouldn't want to do it. Plus, the district attorney, the lawyer who's kind of working for the city, he doesn't want to bother prosecuting anybody for such things anyway. So, you know,
Okay.
that's also interesting to know, like, if you're doing something illegal, anywhere, it helps to know who's in power and what laws do they want to enforce and what laws do they not want to bother with. And it's always a different situation, but they certainly are always harder on the left than they are on the right. That's very, very much
Yes,
the
but
case in Germany and here. Yeah.
maybe, but before all people said, the conservative people all think, and we okay, the police is dealing equal, and now some people are also on the conservative side. They're waking up a little bit, they realize, okay, the system is not so great as we always think, you know.
Yeah.
That's my hope. So
That's certainly, I mean, I think that is happening here with some folks, and then other folks are just kind of doubling down on the more, conservative worldview. I think it can go both ways. I
yeah,
mean, like with all the very, publicized police brutality, for example. I mean, some people have seen that and thought, wow, there really is discrimination against black people, in this country. That it really is true that the police treat black people differently from the way they treat white people. I mean, if you didn't realize that, 2 years ago, then a lot of people did realize it in 2020. It was just so extreme, and also publicized and being protested against, and a lot of people, I think, had real awakenings about a lot of white people about how messed up and how racist this system is. But a lot of other people, what they saw was, oh, those black people are burning down the cities, and which isn't true, but that's what they saw on the news, on their channels, on Fox, and they didn't become more convinced that racism is a problem. They became more convinced that we need more cops. So it's, people reach very different conclusions from the same.
Yes, I think it's the same in the US than in Germany. The people are more and more divided, and they are more and more dogmatic on every side. So it's very hard to not to say, okay, I can understand them a little bit, and then so you have to have your position. And I think if you have something against the system now in Germany, yeah, you're just like the conspiracy theorist. You put them there, and then there are the other people. Some of people who think, okay, system with the state fails, just have to defend it sometimes, because according to the right people, because so there is here the protest against the system is now turning on the right side, and I think in America also. So, but what I said, the right is always better organized.
Yesterday, two police officers in Washington, D.C. were killed by somebody who appears to be a right-wing guy in a car. Yeah, so that's he drove into them. Speaking of right-wing actions, just yesterday. Yeah.
In a police car or what?
No, in Washington, D.C., I think a white man from Indiana, 25-year-old guy in his own car, drove into a couple of Capitol police officers and killed one, and the other was badly injured and I believe died in the hospital. Actually, I think he injured a third as well, but he survived, and shot him dead.
And do you think there are plans in the far right movement to have a really structured turning over of the system, or that's just single actions there?
I don't know. I mean, there's definitely a lot of these single actions which are inspired by right-wing, rhetoric, but not necessarily organized. But then there's also a lot of organized stuff to different degrees. And then there's, of course, the possibility that Trump is going to start his own social media platform, his own TV station, and his own political party. And then once that happens, then, it's a whole different ballgame, I think. What's been happening with, not to drastically change the subject, but I guess kind of a German company which is known around the world by independent musicians, called SoundCloud, has launched a new music streaming platform as of April 1st, apparently, and it was in the news last month. I haven't heard anything about it since they launched. I don't know. And then when I went to SoundCloud's website, it wasn't actually working very well on the day of the launch. Maybe too many people were checking. But has this, being a musician in Germany, have you heard anything about this, the new streaming platform that SoundCloud is doing? Is not on the radar there. Yeah,
I'm just at Bandcamp, and and on YouTube. So
Right.
SoundCloud, I've never been there, and it's a special new program from the makers of SoundCloud, or is this
Yeah,
new?
the people who run SoundCloud are launching a streaming platform to try to basically compete with Spotify, and that sort of thing. Except they don't have the major record labels participating,
Yeah,
and they are and they're distributing the royalties, the payout completely differently than Spotify. So the way they would be distributing royalties, if Spotify did it that way, it would mean people like independent musicians, like, people like us on Spotify would make about 5 times as much money without changing the size of the pie. It would just mean if they did the royalty distribution in a fair way, it would mean that the big three record labels would make a lot less money and the rest of us would make a lot more. And so it's really, if Spotify were to adopt SoundCloud's distribution
yeah.
system, it would affect the lives of millions of musicians around the world, basically, certainly dramatically affect the lives of hundreds of thousands.
So you mean if Spotify makes the takes over the system of Spotify, then it would be more just and better for the little musicians.
Yeah, if Spotify were to use the basic model, the mathematical model that SoundCloud uses, which is a very simple model. Spotify's model is so complicated, and they won't even tell us how it works, right? But
Okay.
SoundCloud, their model is completely transparent, and it's very simple. And it's just like, however much you listen to an artist, you get that artist gets that percentage of the money for that you're putting
Would be
into.
also great for YouTube, huh? That you if they
If any of these platforms did it this
yeah,
way, it would benefit independent musicians.
yeah,
And the reason they don't do it that way is because they want to make the big three record labels happy, and
yeah,
so they do it in such a way that works better for them. So like but it's very confusing. They make it very confusing. So you have to be basically a mathematician to
mm,
understand. And I'm not, but I've been studying this stuff enough that
yeah,
now I do understand why it's working differently depending on different platforms. Like the way they do it is just not fair,
yeah,
and the way SoundCloud is doing it is fair. It's not giving an unfair advantage to independent artists. It's just doing it fairly, for everybody. But what Spotify is doing is giving an unfair advantage to the big three
yeah.
record labels, which already have an unfair advantage because they control radio.
Yeah, will you apply there on this new thing from SoundCloud? Is
Yeah, I put up 10 albums,
yeah,
on SoundCloud's new platform because I think it's very worth participating in. So we'll see how it goes. But I mean, I don't think it will replace or really compete with Spotify unless but it could force Spotify to adopt this model. That's the hope, is that not that it'll could replace Spotify, but that it'll force Spotify to try to do things in a more fair way, but we'll see.
oh, it could be. Yeah, I will search a little bit about this, but it's interesting for little musicians irgendwie irgendwie, ja, got German word in it. So that would be
There's also another
interesting.
on that note too, this new union, this new global union of musicians
Yeah,
that's started up. They organized protests outside of Spotify offices around the world, including in Berlin, on March 15th, and that seems to have also had some kind of a little bit, maybe an impact on Spotify, because it was 5 days after those protests. Spotify started a new website called Loud and Clear,
yeah,
which kind of is supposed to explain how they give away how they do royalties, but it's all it does is make them look bad. I
yeah,
think it's actually kind of funny if you read it. We read their website. They're trying to make themselves look like, oh, we give away so much money to musicians. We're such a good, you know,
Yeah.
participant in the whole global music community. But it just makes it very clear that they're distributing money in a very unfair way. If you depending on how you look at it.
So,
I
if but I'm not at Spotify. I'm just here at the Bandcamp. So if you're the new project of SoundCloud, you get paid by how often they listen to your stream. At Spotify, you get a fixed price, or what do you get?
At Spotify, you get depending on what percentage of music what percentage you were played relative to the total amount of music on the platform globally played that month. That's the percentage. That's how they determine that's the basic idea. That's what they say. But actually, it's more complicated than that. If that weren't bad enough, it's also then more complicated than that because they give bigger percentages to the major labels, and they say that they say they won't say how much the differences are, but they say we give different amounts to different artists depending on what label they're on now. But yeah. So basically, what this means is what typically with an artist that has a number one hit,
Mhm,
like say Chumbawamba. I love the
mhm,
band, right? But Chumbawamba, they have 1.5 million monthly listeners on Spotify.
mhm,
But because of the nature of the band's sort of history, because they have had one big global hit and that's it, right? Tub Thumping, wonderful song. Tub Thumping is responsible for like 70% of their listeners on Spotify. All those other wonderful albums that they made,
mhm,
it's only 30% of their listeners, right? So basically they kind of are a typical example of what happens with really with bands that had a hit. Most people are listening to their hit.
mhm,
And but typically with independent artists, like me, if you look at the way that people behave with my music on Spotify, you can see it. Like you can see it. They let you look at all the numbers, right?
mhm,
They break it down, right? People listen to albums. With
yeah,
independent artists, they listen to whole albums. Typically, it's still
yeah,
typical. So they're not listening to hits because I never had a hit.
yeah,
They're listening to whole album. If they like me, they like whole albums, right? So so then you can see how you do the math differently, and it's going to result in very different numbers. So if you apply the way people usually listen to independent artists, if you apply those listening habits,
yeah,
then you end up with people like us making 5 times as much money from Spotify without changing the overall amount of money in the first at all. So it's very interesting, the stuff SoundCloud is saying. I don't know how many people have been hearing it, but if any musician who makes like $1,000 a year from 1 million streams on Spotify, like, you know,
yeah.
reads this, might be thinking like, okay, so maybe I should be making at least $5,000 a year from those million streams. And, you know, it's not enough to live on, but it's a difference. It's a big difference. Anybody can see, any member of the working class in the world can understand the difference between 1,000 a year and 5,000 a year. That's
So if I want to make a one-hit wonder, then I go to Spotify. And if I want to be a serious independent musician, then I go to SoundCloud. So I now I understand it. Okay,
that's it in a nutshell, I suppose.
I have to yeah. I also don't have a hit, so
Me neither.
we should
So
try.
forget about Spotify.
So it's great. Okay, David. Then
Pleasure seeing you, Frank.
was very interesting. Very variety of insights in the music industry and in the political situation in the US. And stay healthy, and we see us next month.
Excellent. You too.
Okay, bye.
Okay, then. Take care.
Also.